Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. This time we've got our college football playoff quarterfinal preview. This one is the Fiesta Bowl. It's the number 3 ranked Boise State Broncos against the number 6 ranked Penn State Nittany Lions. I'm your host Sean Vowells and I am joined by Joe Meade. Joe, not exactly surprising that this is the matchup that we have at the Fiesta Bowl. Boise State gets the automatic bid by being the conference champion, and Penn State took care of business against SMU in the first round of the college football playoff. So, Joe, what are your overarching thoughts going into this one?
Yeah, I think definitely shock. I know a lot of people criticize James Franklin for his in-game management over the years. That's been one of the most bad things to do in this conference. One thing I will say, in terms of a program builder and runner, he's been proven more than effective, I think, especially over the last decade. I mean, the fact he's still one of the longest tenured coaches in the Big Ten should speak volumes. Just for reference, he got there before Jim Harbaugh even got to Michigan. And why I bring that up is I think he would know in this situation, although unprecedented, to have a scout prep a game plan for Boise while they were in preparation for SMU. So I want to start off saying that. I do think Penn State probably has some advanced scout on this, whether it was someone on the defensive side of the ball, offense, special teams, what have you. I do think they took care of that. In terms of the opponent, I think obviously the story of the game is going to be Ashton, Jeanty, and I think rightfully so. I mean, probably a lot of people thought he was snubbed for the Heisman. I don't really think we should debate it on this show. All I will say is Colorado looked all but anything but impressive a few days ago. If you had the great misfortune of investing your time into that game. I do think, though, Sean, aside from Ashton Jeanty, the obvious scenario is Maddox Madsen, right? The guy who notably beat out Malachi Nelson going into the year. I think a lot of people expected Malachi to win that job, transferring from USC. Clearly not the story at all. Maddox Madsen, I do think Penn State, how they defend the pass is going to be extremely important because I think it goes without saying Jeanty's got to get stacked boxes most of the year. I do think they're going to get Boise State to a few must-pass scenarios, not necessarily a 3rd and 11 or 3rd and 12, something that you get engulfed in a whiteout, but more so the 3rd and 5, the 3rd and 6s, which obviously Jeanty could be factors on those plays, especially 4-down territory. But Madsen's going to have to make some throws, and I don't doubt he could do that. If you look at the stats, the QBR, 22 TDs, 3 picks, been very good protecting the ball. But in this game, he's going to have to take a few shots. He's going to have to stand in there against probably unprecedented pressure for what he's faced in his career, especially the caliber of pass rush Penn State has. And it feels like every time we talk about Penn State, we bring up Abdul Carter, we bring up Kalen King, we bring up the entire pass rush. Really, Sean, I think, if Penn State and Dennis Sutton, how can I forget? If Penn State gets them to 3rd and 5 and 3rd and 6, I think this game is not necessarily going to be a blowout, but it's going to go Penn State's way in terms of, holding on to that 2-score lead, being very effective running the ball, which they've been the last 2 games with Singleton, Allen, whether it was the Oregon game or whether it was the SMU game. So I really think that there's a lot of ways Penn State can win this game and only a few Boise can win it. And, the 2 scenarios I could see for Boise is just Jeanty going completely berserk, which I don't doubt could happen in spurts, but not necessarily an entire game, or Maddox Madsen stands in there and makes some big throws to open up the run game. But I do think that Boise will run it somewhat effectively against the stack box. They've been seeing that most of the year, frankly, all of the year. And I do think they can put up some points. It's just a matter of are they going to start hot and are they going to be in a deficit most of the game? Because if they are, I don't see a great path for Boise.
And coming into this game, Joe, Boise is 12-1 overall in their season. Their only loss coming to the number 1 ranked Oregon Ducks. That was all the way back in week 2, and that was just a 3-point loss at Autzen Stadium, in which the Ducks did return 2 kickoffs. So, or 1 punt, 1 kickoff. So that was a different Oregon team. I think if you go back and listen to our episodes early on in the year, we were a little bit skeptical of that Oregon team. I don't think Boise State would lose by 3 if they played today. So a lot of people are pointing to that game as maybe a example of how Penn State can hang. I think it's a completely different Oregon team now. Boise State hasn't really been challenged at all. They had a couple close games, one-score wins, but it never really looked like they were losing any of them. And Joe, the final point for Boise State I want to make it has been 25 days since they last played. They beat UNLV 21-7 in the Mountain West Championship. So potentially, Jeanty should be coming in with pretty fresh legs. Madsen should be coming in pretty fresh, but as the Boise State might be wearing their home uniforms, Joe, but they're definitely the underdogs here. And if we talked about how underdogs win is you get off to a fast start and you start believing that you can win, and then you just, when the clock runs out, you have more points. It's going to be hard to do that with so much rust. Penn State's game was 10 days ago. I guess that's a little bit more than the regular week, but I think that could be something that we watch out for. Penn State did lean on their defense early against SMU to pull ahead and then kind of just chewed the game away. But that whole argument over the 25 days should be a big deal for Boise State.
Yeah, Sean, and I do want to talk about the job Spencer Danielson's done. Not a lot of people know this. He was the interim for a portion of last year, and then obviously his first full year as a head coach. And why I bring that up, I think he's been at that program long enough. I mean, he's been there from 2017, the beginning of the Brian Harsin era, to now. And I do think he's had to have managed somewhat of a game plan over these 3 weeks since they've known about this matchup, or 3+ weeks, I should say, as of now. I think defensively, they have a very, I wouldn't want to say really good, just a very solid defense. I don't think Penn State's going to move it with ease per se. I do think where they flirt with danger, particularly Boise State, is if they commit too much to the run game. I think Drew Allar's proven in multiple points this year, whether it's through Tyler Warren or one of his other wideouts, that he can burn a defense if forced to, especially if he's given a silver platter to do, which is what Oregon did at times. And for a portion of the game, we saw SMU do it when they were getting desperate. So I do want to highlight that. I think Danielson's going to have a great game plan. I do think they're going to have to stick to it, especially if it works early, because Penn State will move the ball. Singleton and Allar are going to break off some runs. They're going to be efficient. I don't think Boise State should expect to see a clunker of a Penn State performance that they were known for when they had Mike Yurcich and the other 55 other OCs Penn State's had in some of these bigger games. I think Andy Kolonicki's proven that he's more than capable of mustering up a good game plan and having definitely an alternative to the original game plans. Things we've seen a lot this year, with the exception of the Ohio State-Illinois games. I think by November, mid-November especially, they've mustered enough of those. So what's it going to come down to on that side of the ball? I really do believe that Drew Allar's just got to protect it. I think doing a portion of what he did against SMU, clearly not the incomplete passes, but more so trying not to be Superman and just making throws he has to make more so than making the throws he wants to make. I think he's been mature enough and, kind of being the face of the program now. I think he knows what his role is. And I think, just him keeping his head, this is something 2 years ago, Sean, and the Fiesta Bowl became a theme. Jay McCarthy completely lost his mind in the first through the third quarter of that game, throwing 2 pick sixes, kind of rushing, letting the game away from him. I think Drew Allar should have watched that film and learned a lot from that, albeit besides the same venue, kind of a similar situation, expected to win, but Boise State's not a pushover either. So I think he's just got to do his job, do it well, but not try to be a superhuman, because if he does, they could flirt with trouble. And God forbid that Boise State takes a lead with Ashton Jeanty. A 7-point deficit or a 10-point deficit can feel like a 20-point deficit the way they can move the ball and burn clocks. So I do think, like always, starting hot for Penn State is going to be a key factor, and especially finishing hot in that first half, right? I think, if Penn State's behind in the second half and Boise State has possession, that's the exact position Penn State can't be in. I think they know that, and I think their game plan is going to do everything they can to avoid that exact scenario.
And Joe, on the other hand, from what I said earlier, they have had 10 days to prepare for Penn State, probably more if we think about the likelihood that Penn State would have won that game. So if you go back to what we said for Penn State against SMU and Ohio State for that matter, but that's another video, is to start off fast and to not look back. That's a really hard thing for me to see happening here with how much extra preparation. And, they might not look great on the first two drives from being rusty, but on the other hand, I think it is really hard to blow out a team when they've had this much preparation. So I think it will be close. I think it could be tied or within one possession at halftime. And it's really going to come down to how long is a Boise State win feasible for? Because last game it wasn't after the first quarter for SMU. That game was over on the road. I'm not sure really the location has really any advantage for Boise State. You would think, Arizona is closer to Idaho than Pennsylvania, but with how Penn State fans travel, you would think it should be a pretty neutral crowd down there. We're at the Cardinals Stadium, and I think we correctly predicted, Joe, which games would start a little slow and which games would start guns blazing last round. I tend to think this one might be a little bit of a slower feeling it out start.
Yeah, especially for Penn State, I think at the beginning they just want to make Drew Allar, give him some easy reads, maybe get some momentum going, and then if they can get that running game going early, I think that's definitely a possibility for Penn State. One thing I'll say is I think they're going to rely on that very early just to avoid any chance of giving Boise State better field position or falling behind early. I think significantly for the site, Boise State, they have had magic in that building, particularly in the Fiesta Bowl. I don't really believe in that voodoo garbage anymore. I do think they'll have a significant portion of fans. I expect them to be somewhat loud. I don't think it's going to be a significant advantage either way. I do agree with that. Another thing I might add for Boise State is I think the longer they're in this game, the more it tips in their favor, even if it's, a one-score deficit.
Yeah.
Because Penn State, there's been times their offense has been really good, but we've also seen it really bad, right? We've seen that against Illinois. We've seen it in portions, particularly the entire Ohio State game, right? And Danielson's been a defensive mastermind for a while. I think he's going to – I really don't understand why people think Penn State's going to so easily move the ball.
I don't think – at least at first, I don't think they will.
Yeah,
maybe if late, if they wear them down, but not in the first 2-3 quarters.
And we've used this phrase a lot. The July drive, I think that's completely out the window now for Penn State. I think people kind of know what they do on opening series.
Yeah, they shouldn't have any plays left that they haven't done.
Yeah, exactly. They've played enough big games, and perhaps Boise hasn't, right? And that sounds silly because Boise was one and done this year, meaning they lost one game and they were likely out of the playoff after the Oregon loss. So, what does Boise have up their sleeve? What does the House Money team have up their sleeve? We really don't know, and that's definitely the advantage of Boise State.
And so, Joe, with one more point I want to make before predictions here is both teams really do not turn over the ball at all. So I don't know if the sort of keep them in front and make them make a mistake style is really going to work here. Just 3 interceptions for Madsen all year, and you can talk about the quality of competition and the fact that they're winning most of these games, so he's not pushing the ball down the field. All that makes sense, but still, he's thrown 3 interceptions in 13 games. And Allar with just 7. Again, 21-7 for Drew Allar. So maybe whoever does turn it over will be a big story, but I think it's going to be about getting into the red zone and then getting into the end zone, and the team that converts more in the red zone is going to win this game.
100%, Sean. I really have nothing else besides that. You stole my last point, so let's get into these predictions.
All right, Joe. Well, first off, let's read a couple stats about this game. This is New Year's Eve at 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. Is the first of 4 college football quarterfinals here. It is the only one being on the 31st. You'll see this video if you're listening a day before or earlier. The remaining 3 will be on New Year's Day. But Joe, Penn State, despite wearing the away uniforms, is -11 on the spread. Certainly higher than expected, not as high as the SMU game. But Joe, I do think Penn State wins, but I'm going to go Boise State slightly covers 34-24 Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth with this for a while. I do think there's two ways of victory for Boise that I laid out in this episode. I really think that Penn State, and maybe it's just the PTSD I have from the TCU game. I think Penn State can get in trouble in this kind of game if they turn it over. But I think Allar, a lot of people criticize his big game performances. I think that's kind of died down after the Oregon game to a large extent. I do think, when he runs, that's the biggest thing I'm worried about. Is he going to protect that ball? Because I think Boise knows that's probably their best chance to get him to turn the ball over, because he's been very smart about not putting balls in harm's way, albeit a tip ball is always a wild card there too. I'm going to go with Penn State wins. I'm going to go with an even lower score, to be completely honest with you. I think the Lions win a 23-17 game. I do think they get the ball last, and they're able to ice the clock in a way that is. I think Boise gets one last shot, but I don't think they're able to move it on the Penn State defense. And I think Jeanty is largely going to be taken out on that last drive. I think he'll have a lot of success, but I do think Penn State's going to hold it to a moderate amount of success. And I think their offense is going to be smart enough. And I think, quite frankly, James Franklin, as ridiculous as some people might find this, I think in this game that points are going to come at a premium, especially in the second half. And the number of possessions could perhaps be at a premium too. So I think he takes points, and Penn State wins at 23-17 with a Boise State cover. But I do think if Penn State starts to turn the ball over, I could sway this heavily in the favor of Boise State.
It should be a good one, and there is a reason why they picked this one to be the one primetime game here on New Year's Eve. So, Joe, that is all we have from today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to or watching this video. If you haven't watched the other ones, please do so, and we'll be back in a couple days to recap what happens here.